After high school, I started hanging out around the streets and hanging out with the kids, the ballroom kids, and getting into some shit.
Welcome back to Stories in Style. I'm Atiba Newsome, continuing the conversation with my brother, mentor, bestie, and creative powerhouse, Mr. Eric Archibald. If you're just joining us, welcome. Let's get into it. So you were meant to be in the industry one way or another, don't you agree?
One way or another, didn't know how I was going to get there, but I always had a love for it. I didn't see a path through. After high school, I started hanging out around the streets and hanging out with the kids, the ballroom kids, and getting into some shit.
How was it working on Legendary, being that you're from the ballroom scene, you got your start in the ballroom scene, to years later being the costume designer for a show about the ballroom scene?
The word that comes to mind is elated, grounded, taken back in a way where I lived this life. And now that life that was once on the ground is now mainstream and is now paying me. It was a dream. For my very first time at Ballroom was Paris Burning in 1989 at the Club Tracks, where I saw Pat Fields wearing shearing, and there was a bizarre category when this guy came dressed in outfits made out of pin. It was where I learned a lot of designers, like Jean-Paul Gaultier and Issey Miyake. Ballroom was my college. Is where I learned everything about fashion. It was my FIT, which I never made the hallways of FIT, but I made it to every ball. And it was essentially where I learned everything about fashion, hanging out with the kids on the scene, whether how they got their fashion, they got it,
Whether it ended up in a bag or in a girdle, they got it.
It's crazy because I've been talking to a lot of people about, actually my trainer the other day, about the club scene in New York City and how we got to the club we got up at 4 to get ready. I mean, the prep time was longer than that, It would start getting ready around 1:30,
Yes, that's realistic.
Yeah, but we would leave the house around 5 a.m. to get to the club because, one of the reasons was to get to the club at that time was to ditch the bridge and tunnel people. And also, we really didn't want the neighbors to see us in our outfits.
That's the real truth.
You're either wearing a kilt, or some silver pants, which this type of style today is it's pretty normal, I see fashionistas out in kilts and silver pants and silver jackets. Everything runs the gamut. Everyone paints their nails now, I'm still low-key very shy to even paint my nails.
Yes.
Still feel a little insecure about it because I grew up in a time where, you can get fucked up, I'll get called out, But we live in a time now where all the things that we we're scared to do, see people doing it. And I think that's great.
It was more the late 90s when we would go on to Twilight and stuff like that, because it was all in stages. When we were going to Our Factory Bar, that was different. We would dress more casual, more.
We were hood.
Yeah, we were definitely hood. We were wearing anything from Tommy Hilfiger to Ralph Lauren to...
It was oversized DKNY lumberjack shirts for me and polo gray sweats and some Timbs, That was a comfort zone going to Sound Factory Bar. But when we got to Twilo, it was a Gaultier tattoo shirt or a Gaultier kilt, a Gucci sheer underwear, double G's, Gaultier motorcycle boots, with chaps, Yohji Yamamoto overcoat. We would just pile it on. And it was really a time of free expression for us. You know, every time I hear someone said that we were the first to do this, or the first to do this, I was like, we already did this. We wore all these ideas. I heard Kanye saying one time he was the first one to wear leather pants with Timberlands. I'm like, boy, we won a lot of leather pants with Timbs. You know, what I knew then, what I learned then, it's like we as Black gay men, in order to get into certain clubs, certain environments, they won't let you in if you showed up in, you know, with your jeans sagging. So we had to show up and show out.
We had to take it up an extra notch where it was like, who are they? We got to get them in here. Let them in. Like, honestly, when I started hanging out with you guys, I never had to wait online. Like, anywhere, everywhere we went, we were good. It was either we knew them from the ballroom scene, or Eric would just tip the doorman a really nice tip. But I know that we never waited online.
I made it my duty to like befriend all the doormen at the clubs. Whether it was giving them a pair of shoes or a jacket, you know. So when I rolled up with my crew and there was a line, we would just roll in.
And the beauty about our crew when we came in, we all gave a little bit of something different. Like we were never like in the same designer because everybody had such a strong sense of style, their own personal style, that it didn't look like we all got dressed together, even though we did usually get dressed together because we would all leave from the same house out of fear of our families seeing what we were wearing. So we would always get ready at Eric's house, which we called the castle, to all get dressed there. And it was like one of us would be in head to toe Miyake, another one would be in head to toe Gaultier, another one would be in head to toe Gucci, another one would be in head to toe Moschino. So it was like, without even trying, we were kind of given this like fashion gang effect, and it didn't look like, you know, it was like a gimmick, you know, like we all went to the same place to get ready. Like our individuality just like stood out. So we were, I don't want to say stars in our own sense, but we kind of were stars in our own sense.
You don't have to be coy about it. We were definitely stars on the scene.
Yeah, we were.
We influenced a lot of kids. A great example was Margaret said to me one time, she was like, there was a hairstylist of hers, and she was like, Eric and his friends, you know, we were always kind of scared to talk to them. We had such attitude. You would think that we were John Galliano, Alexander McQueen, or Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, you know? You can tell us we were young and just fearless and just free. And what I really loved about my crew, everyone was an individual, you know? Everyone had a voice. We would get into such bitter fights about what artist was popular, what artists we didn't like. It was, for me, it was like Madonna was the greatest thing. And for one other person, it was Whitney Houston. And one other person was Janet Jackson. And we were influenced by music and fashion. And we owned every fashion magazine there was. And we would look through the pages and dare to dream. And we dare to dream of owning these pieces. And we ended up owning those pieces because of our work in hip hop and the people that we came up with. Missy Elliott, you know, Busta Rhymes, and Lil' Kim and Foxy. And talk about nightclub like the Roxy. The Roxy was like the lighter part of the night where you really just like danced. And you walk up the block from 19th Street, 27th Street, Twilo was the place that if you're a real partier, you're there. You're there for 24 hours, you know? And what we wore would not get messed up because we were still so pristine by the time we got there. So by the time we walked through the door, it was just like, and then we were one of the first crews to really start going to nightlife and party that way. You know, there wasn't a lot of us. There wasn't a lot of Black kids, right, Atiba?
Yes, there were not.
But as time went on, we invited people, and then they came in droves, you know? And they would come dress also because they saw the way we dressed.
And those people told other people who told other people. And before you know it, we knew like every Black person in the club because there wasn't many of us. So we all kind of knew each other. Like in this sea of white gay men, there are probably like a dozen black fashion kids, and we knew them all. And we would kind of be in our own little circle on a dance floor. I'd never forget. It was like just cool circle of black kids. We had to like push a little extra to like make a statement to get in because sometimes they would not let you in. They wouldn't.
Yeah. I'll tell you that I met some of my best friends. Dolce Gabbana was born for me in the New York nightlife scene. One night, me and my friend Gerard was out Saturday night, and I saw a young lady by the name of Sonia. She now lives in Australia. In the most amazing outfit, like a little fur shrug, a lace skirt, lace stocking with leaves going up the back. And my vain self said, she has to be my friend. She looks stunning. I was like, Sonia and I are still friends this day, and she was wearing Dolce & Gabbana. And ever since that, we would run to the Dolce & Gabbana store every Saturday to get an outfit. And before you know, all the other kids were wanting to wear Dolce & Gabbana to the club. But we had the best Dolce & Gabbana because we had the insight of what to get, what to wear. And our closets are still packed. My closet is still packed with Dolce & Gabbana from the 90s and the 2000s that I refuse to get rid of. But our love for Dolce & Gabbana, we got to pull Dolce & Gabbana for Foxy Brown for her first video.
I remember that. And I remember this one specific Dolce leopard print coat that we pulled for Foxy. And I don't know if you remember, Eric, but it was raining in Central Park that day.
How could I forget?
It rained for hours and it kind of messed everything up with the schedule. And I remember the rain coming down so hard that just from me holding the coat, some rain got inside the lining. So it got a little wet. So when I went to put it on her shoulders while she was on the horse, keep in mind, they're riding horses in Central Park. So I put the coat on her shoulders for the scene, and I guess it was a little wet. And she said, I'll never forget this. She said, "Ugh, threw it on the ground into some mud." That was like, and this was not a cheap coat.
I think the coat was made out of some sort of brush, fake ultra suede. So when that gets wet, it get ratty,
It was like,
and my dilemma was like, we just got freaking pulled Dolce & Gabbana and we fucked it up.
It was Foxy Brown, Get You Home Tonight featuring Blackstreet. And that was the first time I got to actually style somebody, which was Blackstreet. June gave me the opportunity to dress Blackstreet. She told me, put them in this. And I remember it was a bunch of Armani Exchange stuff. We loved Armani Exchange back in the day. We wore it a lot. We used it a lot. Everything was Armani Exchange. From head to toe, the jeans, the belt, everything.
I remember the inception of Armani Exchange also when they first had their first store on Prince and Broadway, and they weren't even open yet. And we got the opportunity to go in and pull stuff, from Armani Exchange, and we wore a lot of it. But back to Foxy Brown, that day was just a mess. Foxy hated her hair. Foxy hated her makeup. The first day of the shoot, she didn't like her makeup. It took hours before we started. We literally got there like 4 or 5 a.m. up in the hills somewhere in New Jersey. I don't even remember where we were, but it was a rainy day that day. Foxy wanted everything to be a bikini and hot shorts. Sam Fine was the makeup artist. We didn't start shooting until around 1 o'clock because Foxy refused to leave the trailer because she didn't like anything.
I just remember that scene like it was yesterday because it took a while for us to finally start. But when we did, it was magic. She had nothing but chocolate girlfriends, which I thought was the most amazing thing. It was nothing but beautiful Black girls. There was not one light-skinned or fair-skinned girl in her crew. It was all dark chocolate beauties. Every last one of them.
I think the catsuit she wore was her own, actually.
It was. As a matter of fact, she had worn it before for a photo shoot, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of like a really popular catsuit.
As the years went on, Foxy didn't change much. She would still want to crop every Tom Ford Gucci piece into a bikini top, cut all the shorts into to bikinis.
Who actually took the scissors and cut that shirt? Was it Foxy?
It's not Foxy's decision. It wasn't ours. We didn't want to cut up couture. We wanted to show it as it was shown on the runway. But good on her for knowing who she is and wanting to do something different, because it's never about us. We, the facilitators in fashion, we bring the pieces, but sometimes it takes an artist, whose work is actually on display, whose music is on display to really express themselves in a way that really helps their career. It's like, you may not always agree. And I often tell my assistant and whoever I'm working with, just because the artists have an idea does not mean that you did not help facilitate the look. You can actually learn a new skill or a new idea on how to put something together. And shout out to June Ambrose, because my friend Michael Kenneth Williams, God bless the dead, introduced me to June years ago. And she came to my house in Queens to pick up clothes for our R. Kelly video. The video was R. Kelly's Slow Dance. I loaned her all my clothes. I lived in Queens at my parents' house. I had all these designer stuff. Don't ask me how I got it, but I got it. And I just love fashion because all my fashion is from going to the clubs. And she lived in the Bronx, and I live in Queens. That's a ride. She came to my house, got all my stuff. And before she drove off, she looked out the window and said, "Do you want to come to set tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm coming to set." Yes. I went to set. It was on 30-something Street. I pulled up, put on my best pair of linen pants from Macy's and a linen shirt. And there was these sandals I had from Tootsie Plohound that I saw Q-Tip wearing at the bus stop. Q-Tip and I live in the same neighborhood, St. Albans, Queens. Shout out to St. Albans, Queens, where stars are made. LL Cool J is from St. Albans, Queens, Hype Williams is from St. Albans, Queens. Don't play, don't play, don't play. Queens in the house, right? And I went to set, and that day I realized, this is what I want to do for a living, I was very shy. I was very introverted. So June would just have me dressed like the extras, and being on set was different for me because I don't like being in the spotlight. I'd rather be in the back doing the work. And I still kind of have to force myself to take the lead sometimes, because sometimes I let the people I work with do too much, and I have to realize they hire me because of my vision. So at one point, the next day, it was a 2-day shoot. We were shooting downtown on Delancey Street, and it was a club scene where R. Kelly was performing in the middle of the living room. It was a party, And the first AD was like, last look. And Hype looked at me and he was like, go in there and fix him. I was like, and I was like, in shock, but I went in and did it anyways, And I knew that's what I wanted to do from that day.
Thanks for listening to Stories in Style. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. And check us out on YouTube at Stories in Style. We're just getting started.